Further analysis, let's bring in James Dorsey, who is a senior fellow at the Rajaratnam School of International Studies in Singapore. James, a disturbing account we heard just now from our correspondent in Jenin, Zaina, there describing Israeli forces firing in the air, forcing them to delete images and footage of what was going on in Jenin. And we're also hearing reports of Israeli bulldozers demolishing large areas of the now virtually empty Jenin refugee camp. What do you make of all of this? These actions, these tactics by the Israeli army do seem eerily familiar to what went on in Gaza.
Well, indeed, but first of all, it's not the first time that we're seeing this. We've been seeing this for quite some time, actually since the beginning of the Gaza war. We're only seeing it on a grander scale and with a greater number of displaced residents who are being pushed out of the camps. But by and large, it's the same thing. I think what we're seeing is, however, is a much broader picture, which is that Israel is determined to use overwhelming military force and intimidation to basically secure its borders. You saw that in southern Lebanon. You saw that obviously in the extreme in Gaza. You're seeing that with the demand by Prime Minister Netanyahu that the Syrian military and Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the rebel group, not move south of Damascus. And you're seeing it in these operations in the on the West Bank. Keep in mind that you've had, again, already before the October Hamas attack and the Gaza war, you had a burgeoning armed, very low level, but nonetheless armed resistance in the West Bank. And the Israelis are clearly determined, no matter what it costs, to kill that in the scheme.
And given the developments that we're seeing in the occupied West Bank, plus Trump's proposal to shift Palestinians out of Gaza, these developments have prompted fears of a new Nakba. Do you think those fears are justified?
They're obviously justified. We don't know what's going to happen, even though it's not clear how, the degree to which you would have to go to push Palestinians out of Gaza is one that probably would be even unacceptable to the Americans, maybe not to the Israelis. But having said that, if you look at what has happened, Trump put out this statement. He's since backtracked it somewhat. And we're now but what he has succeeded in doing is galvanizing the Arab states into coming in with a response, an alternative plan. And so we're going to have to see what that alternative plan looks like when it is presumably adopted by an Arab summit in Cairo next week. But if you were a Palestinian on the West Bank or Gaza, I think you would have every reason to be concerned about what your future on the territory is.
And James, we saw in July the International Court of Justice say that governments have obligations to ensure that Israel brings the illegal occupation to an immediate end. Is there any sign of that happening?
On the contrary, you basically had the U.S. President Donald Trump advocate a policy that is in violation of international law. We simply live in a world where might is right. And the rule of law and what international law says is almost irrelevant. There's only, in this case, one country that could impose its will on Israel, or at least credibly attempt to do so, and that's the United States. But I think we also know that it's not going to happen It's only going to happen if Donald Trump wants it to happen. I think, again, next week is going to be a litmus test. It was the Trump, even before coming into government, that strong-armed Benjamin Netanyahu into entering into the first phase of the ceasefire. We'll now have to see also with the arrival tomorrow in the Middle East and in Israel of Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, what the Americans want to do with the second phase of the ceasefire, whether or not they're going to, again, strong-arm Israel's arm, or whether they're going to try and either let it just elapse or try to extend it.
James Dorsey, Senior Fellow at the Rajaratnam School of International Studies in Singapore, thank you for your analysis.